Welcome to Still Untitled, the Adam Savage Project. I'm Will Smith.
I'm Adam.
And I'm Norm.
Hey, so we're in the cave today.
We are.
It's a chilly winter day in San Francisco. Short
You know,
sleeves.
it's 50 degrees outside.
Yeah, it's terrible. This is the darkest part
brisk.
of winter.
Oh, God. Yeah. I was in New York this weekend, and it was freezing.
Yeah, that's real weather.
Like,
they don't
like
turn around.
Uber cab actually rescued me from frostbite. That's how cold it was.
You know, I've done that thing where you get on the plane in San Francisco and you pack and maybe you don't think about it, and then you land in the middle of a blizzard, and if you don't have the right shoes, you can lose toes.
Now, shoes are the thing that I never compromise on. Like, I wore two pairs of socks every day.
Yeah,
because as long as my feet are warm, I'm okay. But I had spent Sunday in New York hanging out with a new friend of mine, and we spent 5 hours talking, and I wasn't dressed for the weather. And before we parted, he was like, you know, I got some jackets. You want to borrow a jacket? And I'm like, no, I'm cool. I'll just catch a cab. And then I drop him off at his shop, and it's like 4:55, and at 5 o'clock is the shift change in Manhattan.
Yeah.
And there's not a cab to be. It is like the city is always 80% taxis, but all of a sudden, all their lights go out.
Yeah,
and I walked like a mile and a half, thinking well, maybe I can get to the hotel, and then I was like, I don't think I can get to the hotel. And then I was like, I'm not making it. Go on without me.
At some point, you start looking for a deli to go in and get a completely unnecessary sandwich just to be warm for a minute.
So you're closing an oven.
Yeah.
And then and I had already been to all the shops on Spring Street down in Soho.
yeah.
So I eventually pulled out my frozen finger and dialed Uber cab, and they were there in 4 minutes.
Wow.
We had
Innovation.
We had some
saving toes and lives.
Uber was real hit or miss for us on our New York trip last year, but it's a wonderful service. Those guys do something nice.
I was impressed. If they were able to get to me in 6 minutes flat on 5 a.m. on an average Sunday.
Yeah.
Wow.
5 p.m.
p.m. on an average Sunday.
5 a.m. would be much easier.
5 a.m. would be bad.
5 a.m. is like zombie movie time in New York. That's if you want to go shoot the opening of that Vanilla Sky.
You said you never compromise on shoes. You have like just one pair of shoes that are all purpose?
No. I guess what I mean is that whenever I know I'm going to deal with cold weather, I may put on an extra shirt or make sure I've got a couple of layers, but I always make sure my feet are going to be warm. Yeah. Like I know, and I know this from having shot in Alaska over 2 different winters on Mythbusters, that as long as my feet are warm, I could deal with almost anything else.
For me, it's socks and hats. If I have a hat and a pair, and I'll literally wear like a pair of thick mountaineering socks, and then like another pair of not quite as thick, but almost thick inside socks, to the point that I need an extra size up in the shoe that I'm wearing.
So this is a regular part of the podcast that we spend like a good 15 minutes not getting to a subject. So to continue this not getting to the subject,
of course.
When we went to Alaska the first time, I called up a friend of mine who is a cameraman in the Antarctic. Like he spent a winter in the Antarctic filming, right? And I said, what boots should I bring?
Yeah.
And he sent me these ones, I think Northern Outfitters, I think is the name. They're like Kiss boots, right? The soles are like 4 inches tall.
Like they're that tall to insulate you from the ground, right? Yeah.
And you don't wear socks with them. Like
What?
they're specially made so that you just slip your feet in. And I have to, and not only are they giant and really high, but they're crazy light. Like they're only a little bit heavier
So
than
like
my
ski
steel
boots,
toes.
kind of.
Kind of like ski boots, except like
Super
half the
light.
weight of the lightest ski boot I've ever seen.
But what happens if water gets in? Like it's super tight?
It's actually, no, it's not super tight. It's got these like 3-layer linings, and it's all about wicking water away from your foot and insulating you.
So it's like a thermos for your foot.
And I found they kept me absolutely freaking toasty the whole way.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've got to talk about
Can you
shoes.
be very mobile in them?
Yeah. I had no problem walking in snow, walking everywhere. I wore them for 2 solid weeks. And I mean, we spent the episode we did where we blew up dynamite on a frozen lake. That was 5 days in 35 below zero weather. Now at 35 below zero, that's where Fahrenheit and Celsius.
Yeah, negative 40 is it.
Yeah, so it is like that is freaking cold, and I was fine.
When you guys do something like that on a location like that, are you like camping by the lake, or are you flying back and forth to town or something at night? Or
no. We wouldn't put ourselves through something like that where the travel time takes so long.
Okay.
So for that one, that was actually in Motsu, I think is the name of it. I know people from Alaska are probably yelling at me right now.
It's okay.
It is in the district up where Sarah Palin was actually an assemblywoman up there. And the bomb squad up there, the Anchorage bomb squad, was fantastic. But that's not the point of my story. The point of my story is that we were actually not that far from civilization. We were only about a 15-minute drive from a hotel there.
Well, it's like Anchorage. I went to Anchorage 10 or 15 years ago, and I think it's grown up some since then. But it was it wasn't. It didn't feel as cold as you felt like it should be in Alaska. And I was there in March, so it was the end of the winter for the early spring. And it was kind of like when you go to Arizona in the late summer, and you're like, oh, it should be hotter. It's 120 degrees, but it doesn't really feel that hot. It's so dry. As long as you have the right clothes on, I felt like I wasn't getting kind of wicked heat away. Which I know is a weird thing to say.
We were there in January. Where
that's a whole
cold.
Yeah.
And the funniest like culture shock we got for being in Alaska was, no, I think we were there in December, right? Because there was a Christmas dance at a high school. So we're staying at there's an amazing hotel in Anchorage called the Captain Cook Hotel.
Absolutely. And the salmon hash that they serve in the restaurant there is the best thing I've ever eaten.
Agreed entirely. And they're on the top floor. I hate to give this secret away, but I should. They have a couple of top floor suites that are big multi-room suites that are like really crazy reasonable. And I spent a week in those just like feeling like, looking out over all of Anchorage. You're like, oh.
It's like you're looking. The thing about Alaska, and I know this is the cliche, but it's big. Like everything is, the town it's a pretty big city, and it feels tiny because there's these enormous mountains all around you. The river is huge at that point. I don't know what it's like in the wintertime, but when we were there, it looked like it was like 3 miles across.
Yeah. And and everyone was really, really cool. So we're pulling up to the hotel one day after shooting, and we're in the car, so we had the heat cranked all the way up. Mm-hmm. So when you get out of the car and the wind's blowing past you at the at entrance to the hotel, it's like really cold. And the kind of cold where it's like, it's not even what you think of as really cold. It's like it hits you and you get a headache.
It's painful.
Yeah, like
right?
if you breathe through your mouth, you have lung problems as a result.
But meanwhile, there are these cars pulling up and girls and boys are getting out. And the boys are in tuxes, but the girls are in skirts and pumps. And like I'm looking at them thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. I've got a headache and I'm bundled up and these girls look fabulous and they're just totally, literally chilling.
You adjust to your environment.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. They didn't turn the heat up in the car. Mm-hmm. So temperature difference.
Well, but the thing about it is when you're outside and it's that cold out, even when we were there in March, still you'd go inside and it wouldn't be normal room temperature inside. It would be like 55 inside. You'd be like, this feels great.
Yeah, totally.
This is amazing. So speaking of Alaska.
Yeah, that's a nice segue.
Yeah, we were going to talk about shop safety today.
Yes.
Exactly. It's perfect. It's what everybody thinks of when they think
segue,
of
because I say it's a segue.
Halibut, salmon, king crab, and shop safety.
And stitches.
Yeah. Just to start, let's all hold up all of our hands and fingers. Okay. We're all intact.
We are all intact. I have, I believe, 49 stitches.
Wow.
In my two hands.
Just in various places.
Well, it's the first major one I got was from putting my hand through a shower door here. That was 7 stitches.
Okay. That seems like an accident, though, not necessarily a work-related injury.
An accident. Then there was a grinder that bit me, 7 stitches. And by that point, I was like, ooh, 7 and 7. And then I was holding a knife trying to peel glue off a model, dragged it right through my thumb. The left hand has taken the brunt.
Yeah, well, it's the dumb hand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
14 stitches up the middle of the thumb. No nerve damage at all. It's unbelievable.
Good. That's really lucky.
I think a couple places here. Yeah, I had an accident. They were going to give me 5 stitches, and I was like, "I'm sorry, doc, you're going to have to add 2 more stitches. I don't care where, but I'm going 7, 7, 7, 14. Now I need another 7, please."
All of my hand injuries, I had a couple of stitches from a whittling accident, finger carving accident when I was a Boy Scout. And then I've done some pretty dumb stuff in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. Turns out potato peelers, like the potato peeler, I use the mandolin all the time, all the really, like the scary kitchen stuff. The potato peeler has gotten me more than anything else.
Really?
Because usually I do something dumb. This is what always happens is when I'm peeling a tiny little potato, like a real tiny little creamer, I hold it the same way I would when I'm peeling a russet, and then just clip the top of a finger off.
Oh yeah.
Turns out that was I had to glue that one shut. That was no stitches.
I was using the Julienne attachment on our mandolin for making the carrot and daikon thing for
like the relish
sandwiches.
Yeah.
And I was using this little julienner, and I ended up getting these 5 perfect little scars on my thumb.
That's always nice.
Little triangles.
Yeah.
So we did the video with the one they build, and People loved it. It was a great video, but some people commented.
There was some comment about my standing there moving while the table saw was running.
Yeah.
I think we should preface this by saying anytime you show yourself doing anything on the internet, there's somebody that's there to tell you you're doing it not safe.
No. You know what? And I read those comments, and I thought about it. So, by way of explanation, the commenter is totally right. That is not proper shop safety practice. I have to totally admit that. I will tell you, however, I'm not gonna try and qualify it. I'll just say that for me, the way I think about a table saw, I'm not worried about my behavior. Now, that's probably a bad practice to tell people, like, go on your own recognizance of this. But the table saw is unique among all tools in that it terrifies me more than any other. I never use a table saw without picturing my fingers flying across the shop. I'm not exaggerating even a little bit.
No, it's scary as hell.
I picture, no joke, somebody walking in the door unexpectedly and tripping and spilling a bucket full of marbles and grease. And all of a sudden I lose my footing and land my chest first on the table saw blade. Every time my hands are within a foot, every time my body is near a running table saw, I am constantly checking my center of gravity, my balance. I'm keeping both feet on the floor. I am moving so that I can get myself out of the way. I'm thinking about kickback. All of those things are running through my head. So in the case, because I've never lost that terror of the table saw, and I never want to lose it, the moment I feel comfortable in front of one is the day I'm going to lose a pinky.
Oh no.
I'll tell you.
But I mean, that, just
vigilance.
to be clear, that, like,
constant vigilance.
That is the. I'm glad that it's not just me, because the table saw and the bandsaw have always been really scary to me.
Yeah, see, the bandsaw doesn't scare me, and I got 14 stitches on the bandsaw.
So how do you condition yourself?
Yeah.
Like, you have a lot of experience with table saws and bandsaws. Why one, not the other?
The bandsaw just moves so slowly. So the thing that I did with the bandsaw, which was I was using a dull blade, keep things sharp. So.
And that applies to kitchens and everything,
We'll get to a list of rules. But I was using a dull blade, which means I was pushing something into the bandsaw blade, and I hit a softer piece of wood, a part of the wood. I was sawing through plywood, and the bandsaw cut through and right into my finger. Oh. And so those of you out there who've had stitches, you know, there's always the point at which you're like, you know you've been injured, it's time to look, and the question you have is, how much is this going to change my day?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
What kind of day am I about to have?
Is this the end of the day? Have we reached the end now? Is this, yeah.
So the bandsaw one was it's like, sometimes you're like, I can probably butterfly that puppy.
I'm gonna glue it and put a Band-Aid on there. It'll be fine.
49 stitches on my hands. There's probably cause for 60.
Yeah.
But I butterfly a lot and I disinfect. I mean, I'm actually really assiduous with the injuries on my hands because I found, strangely, over 35, my hands don't heal as fast as they used to.
Nothing heals as fast as it used to.
Just as you get older and your body starts healing slower. So when I get injured, I keep it dressed. I keep it antibacterial stuff on it, the Neosporin. I change the dressing. I let it breathe at night. I do all those practices, and I keep on top of that. But wait, where was I?
You were talking about the bandsaw.
Oh, right. So the bandsaw, it moves so slowly, and even the cost of touching it is relatively low compared to the table saw.
I look at that thing and I see fingers coming off of the joint.
It was invented for cutting meat.
Right.
Right. That's its purpose, is cutting meat.
Right. I could cut a country ham on that or my hand off.
So I maintain a respect for the bandsaw, but it doesn't terrify me. The table saw, I'm not remotely joking that it terrifies me. So in that sequence where you're watching me in front and it's running, it might look like my consciousness is drifting, but it's not. I mean, and that's the thing. And again, I can't advocate that this is proper shop technique. I'm just explaining myself, my own personal.
For me, when I use the table saw, I'm always thinking the center of gravity thing is super important. Yeah. It's the thing that I'm always thinking about. Yeah. And then I'm also always thinking about how far my hands are from the blade when I'm pushing stuff through. And if it's something that's too small, if I'm a hand's width on either side of it, I use another tool.
That's why you use pieces of wood to push.
You use pieces of wood to push it through. Also, I always remember, because this happened to my friend Robbie, when you're doing repetitive work on the table saw, that's when you're going to lose your focus.
Breaking down a sheet of plywood is terrifying.
And if I'm making a bunch of 1-inch strips, all I'm thinking is, this is how Robbie got bit. This is how Robbie got bit. This is how Robbie got bit. Because I sat there and watched him sitting there with this massive scar in his hand when we were working on something at ILM, and it was awful, you know? I think about, there's a sequence in For the Love of the Game. Kevin Costner's doing woodwork alone in his little shack, and he gets an injury. I think when I'm on the table saw, I think of how pissed off my wife would be for me to come home and be like, I need you to take me to the hospital. I mean, I seriously think of all those repercussions, losing fingers, losing time, the stupidity. You know, when I have been injured because of my foolishness, it often throws me off for the better part of a week because I get really mad at myself. I remember working on the lathe.
There's another dangerous piece of equipment.
Oh, God, yeah. And I'm working with a 3-jaw chuck, which means if you touch it, you're going to break a finger.
Yeah.
And I'm sanding on it, and I slip, and it hits my knuckle. But it hits my knuckle just slightly. It's not even an injury. But the degree to which I came close to feeling like I lost that finger made me mad for 3 days.
Well, I mean, sometimes after that, if you have a close call on something like that, it gives you the shakes, and then you never think, like for me at least, I never cannot think about a circular saw, even a circular saw, without thinking about the time that the blade caught and it shot back, and I almost broke cracked several bones on my face.
Yes. So, I mean, this is the thing. When we talk about shop safety, we have to admit that everyone who works in a shop, no matter how good they are, is going to get injured. You're working around these dangerous tools. They are meant for cutting. We are soft.
Yeah.
We are not meant for cutting. And we're going to get bit from time to time. And you're going to get bit. And the real question is why. And examining the reasons why is the place from which you really want to start the shop safety discussion. You get bit because you're working with dull blades. Mm-hmm. Honestly, that is, Gaver Tully has that in the 10 Dangerous Things You Should Let Your Kids Do TED Talk. What are the 3 rules of a knife? Keep it sharp, move it away from you, never force.
Yeah.
And the never force and keep it sharp are actually totally linked, because when you're working with a dull blade, you're going to work harder. And when you work harder is when you're going to slip.
Every time I've cut my hands with a knife, it's because the knife was dull.
So to that end, I keep, I never don't have 10 extra bandsaw blades. I never don't have 5 extra table saw blades. I have a really good stock of sharp stuff in this shop because that's a key safety thing.
Well, and it's good to, at least with kitchen knives, I found it's good to make a relationship with a professional sharpener. I bought one of those Chef's Choice sharpeners years and years ago. It's good in a pinch, but you can't beat taking it to the guy who spends 20 minutes with each blade and does an unbelievable job sharpening those knives.
So the other thing about safety with the tools is properly setting up. A lot of people think, then this is a classic beginner's way of thinking about tools. People think of using a tool as, how do I put this? Let's say you want to make a box. They think you use a table saw to cut the wood to make the box. But in fact, the table saw is, even though it is the primary tool with which you make the wood into the shapes you need, it is the smallest part of the equation. And nobody thinks that way until you're become a craftsman, when you realize that setup is everything and tool use is 5% of what you're doing. Setup is 95%.
Yeah.
Getting ready to use the tool, knowing that you're going to be on this side of the kerf or that side of the kerf, knowing what you're going to cut and how you're going to cut it, and properly pacing yourself so you understand what you're setting up to do. Okay, I'm going to do this. This piece is too small. I need to set up a different thing in order to cut this safely.
Or giving yourself enough time. I mean, a lot of times, it's one of the things that kind of scares me about the shared workspaces.
Well, rushing
is that if you know you have 3 hours and you have this much work to get done, and then somebody else is going to want the tool that you're using, then you frequently find yourself in a place where you're busting ass, and that's when
do you
I've
find
always
that
made mistakes.
At places like Tech Shop, when you take a lesson there, that obviously the first lesson is safety, they give you enough of that, and it's reinforced enough?
Well, so at someplace like Tech Shop, their safety lessons are aimed toward not injuring yourself, not damaging the equipment, and not or injuring anyone else.
Yeah.
They're less concerned with teaching you how to use, like when you take a lathe safety class at Tech Shop, you learn how not to kill someone with a lathe,
right,
and not to wear a hoodie with strings and stuff like that. You don't you learn the very basics of using a lathe, but they kind of expect you to self-teach yourself, and they just want to make sure you know how to do that, how to use that tool safely.
So, I mean, one of the things that I do, and I think of these as subroutines, is I run phrases through my head. And they are phrases like repetitive work gets you injured. Whenever I'm doing it, that phrase is ringing through my head like a mantra. Dull tools will bite you. They'll either slow you down in time, or they'll wreck your material. They'll wreck your material, or that one piece of wood you've got left, or they're actually going to hurt you because you're forcing into them. And rushing, I mean, and I'm a particular case here, right? Because I work really fast, as evidenced by the one-day build, and I get small bulleted pieces of time here in the shop. And when I get those periods of time, I want to maximize them, which means that I do rush around. But I have invested in a set of tools that allows me to work fast, and I'm always thinking as I'm doing that, don't rush too much.
Yeah. Well, and you've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
That is worth something. It's not an excuse.
Yeah. No, it's not an excuse. It's come from hard-won experience. And the trick is, you're gonna get injured. You really want to make sure those injuries are small.
Yeah.
You know,
Band-aids, not stitches. Right.
Band-aids, not stitches. Safety glasses are something that's covering your eyes is the lowest cost insurance there is against the worst injury you could imagine.
Yeah.
One piece of hot steel from the lathe in your eye could change the rest of the way you see for the rest of your life.
Right now.
You know, and it's like, those are the things that you think, right? You never leave the key in the lathe chuck.
Or the mill. God forbid, don't ever leave it in the mill.
And because if you do, you know, I worked in a shop where there was a hole in the wall.
Oh, yeah.
From the lathe key being put in there. And that person never was allowed to use a lathe again.
And I think that's the right answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I taught at the Academy of Art, that was one time. All you had to do was leave the key in at one time, and you were going to be out of using the lathe in my
class. Well, and I mean, the lathe is one of those things that is so super unforgiving if you make the slightest mistake. Either on the material side, or I mean, you hear the horror stories about the girl with the long hair, the guy with the long hair that gets caught and bad things.
Right. So I've got a foot brake on my lathe, and it's one of my favorite features.
Yeah,
because I've got a foot on it the entire time I'm working on it. Dunk, and I stop it.
Yeah,
you know, and I've had close calls on a lathe too. You know, again, you can't avoid. There's no way to avoid risk. Safety isn't about eliminating risk because it's not feasible. You're mitigating it.
Well, if you're doing the kind of stuff that you're talking about doing and working with these tools, it's mitigation, not finding.
Always be thinking.
Yeah,
always be prepared.
Yeah, and you're wearing gloves. You are no loose hanging things. The long hair. I'm nearsighted. I'm quite nearsighted, so I see really beautifully from about 4.5 inches away, and I always want to get my eye right down there on the drill press for aligning the hole.
Yeah.
And I had to go buy like 3 different versions before I found the one I loved of magnifying lenses that give me the view I want.
We have to talk about this because I wanted a pair of those things you clip onto your glasses that surgeons wear for years.
I've got a pair, and they're actually quite nice. They've gone way down in price over like 10 years ago. All you could get were the Zeiss ones, and they were about $700 or $800.
That's more than I'm willing to pay.
Yeah. I found a pair, and you can try them out with a nice wide field of view, and they're about 120, and they're fantastic.
Perfect. Flip them over your glasses.
But at the same time, one of my model making mentors, Mitch Romanowski, told me, and I actually agree with him, those visor ones with the little flip down lenses, those are as good or better than almost anything.
I've used those for like SMT soldering and stuff like that. And it's amazing. The thing that amazes me about anytime you're working with magnification is how quickly your motor control adjusts to the magnification you have.
Really, even though your perception has changed, you're more aware then.
It's not even that. It happens almost at a subconscious level. You become able to you become able to put tiny little transistors on a very specific place without the kind of shake and jitter that I would have. I don't. There's a name for the phenomenon, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
First aid kit. You should always have a first aid kit around.
I have an extensive first aid kit, and actually I have first aid kits in my cars. I buy the little ones on Amazon that are like, you know, for the 20 people, whatever. I've got a ready to go first aid kit in the house. I've got one here in the shop. I always know where it is. I teach my kids basic first aid. And you know, the things you absolutely need in there are like a Neosporin and antibacterial. You need the wipes. You need a bunch of gauze. Band-Aids are great, and you should have every type of Band-Aid you've ever wanted. They're not that expensive.
No, you can load up.
Buy the really good cloth ones and just buy tons of them. But get every size. Get really big ones. Get really small ones because they'll all come in handy.
Well, and you want gauze and tape.
You want gauze
in case you have something that's
when you have
bigger.
something big where you need to elevate it. Let's talk about like those key rules about, if you do get stitches on your hand and there's going to be time before you can get to the hospital, you've got to get gauze on it. You got to get something clean on it. You've got to hold pressure, and you've got to get it above your heart.
Right.
The more you have it,
the higher you get it, the better.
higher you get it, the less it's going to bleed out because of gravity.
Right.
It's amazing how simple that is.
The thing I would say is that most places the Red Cross offers first aid classes that are inexpensive or free. I don't know if that's changed. Local community centers do that stuff too. If you haven't taken a first aid class, I did one in Boy Scouts. I should probably take another one at this point because it's been 20 years. But it's an easy thing to do, and if something bad happens, you'll be very glad you spent an afternoon.
And here's a note about the gauze and tape. The moment you get an injury, you're going to use all the gauze you have. So you're really going to want to make sure to like double check. I was actually just going through my kit a couple days ago because I cut myself and I was like, oh, I don't have any more gauze. Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, and
Amazon order.
And those pads, the absorbent pads are good. The non-stick ones are great if you have something that looks like it's going to be gnarly to peel off.
Yeah.
Also just rags. Like clean rags
and
are
paper
fine.
towels,
Yeah.
obviously, those are the you want to keep it clean, you want to get it elevated. I have this thing that happens when I have severe injuries, and I'm just saying this just to be honest, so that like I don't sound like I'm trying to be too macho. I pass out when I get severe injuries, but I don't pass out until I make sure everything's taken care of.
Okay.
And it's not like it's really funny. So there was this point at which, this is again like 10 years ago. I'm a single dad. I'm alone in the house. My boys are asleep. It's 11 o'clock at night, and I've got one of my old Blade Runner pistols. I'm trying to peel some paint off of it using a fish boning knife.
Brilliant. What could possibly go wrong?
And
3 a.m.
I'm forcing it, and I think to myself, as you always do, I wonder if this is going to tink and through my thumb, right here, like all the way along here. So 14 stitches.
That's
so
not good.
I'm standing there holding on to it, just thinking, stupid. I can't go to the hospital right now because my kids are here.
Yeah.
So I call up my friend Michelle and Jason. They live around the corner. And I'm like, I need you guys to come on over. And they're like, okay, we're on our way.
Yeah.
It's great. They didn't have a kid at that point. So they came over. And then I saw Jason coming up the stairs. I was out front having a cigarette. Back then I smoked because I was stupid. But out
smoking is bad.
Back then
This is bad idea genes, Adam.
Yes. So I was having a cigarette, and Jason walks up, and he walks past me into the house, and I turn around to look at him, and then I have this weird thought, which is, why is Jason on the ceiling?
Oh, you hit the floor?
And then I blink and I realize that I'm lying down on my back looking at him upside down.
Now, had you been this way the whole time?
No.
Okay.
I stood out there just fine. So I maintained until rescue arrived.
There you go.
And then I crapped out. I had an accident after work on Mythbusters a couple years ago. And the same thing is like, I got injured in my hand. I said, I need 600 milligrams of ibuprofen. I need some gauze. I need some Band-Aids. I need cold water. Get me a chair and someone hold on to my shoulders. And then I literally sat down and someone held my shoulders and I passed out. And then I came back about, 10 seconds later. I was like, okay, let's go to the hospital.
So I guess that does it for shop safety
rules.
rules.
I will tell you, the first time I ever used a table saw, the person who handed me a piece of wood to cut didn't know it was my first time, and I didn't want to tell them.
Yeah, always.
That piece of wood flew right back into my stomach and hurt, and probably informed my lifelong fear of table saws. But when I taught at the Academy of Art, I had the same thing happen to a kid, and the first thing I did was make him take that piece of wood and feed it back through.
Get back up on the horse.
Totally. You have to have respect and fear, just like working with horses.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that level of consciousness remember that that axiom, and I don't even know if it's true. We haven't tested it on the show. Beginning helicopter pilots never crash. It's only experienced ones because you
don't test that on the show.
No,
it's not a good idea.
It is true that experience can breed a level of comfort that's not safe.
Yeah,
and you have to be vigilant against that, because when you're not is the point at which you're going to the hospital and you're going to spend. Remember, every trip to the hospital is a 6-hour adventure.
Tell me about it. It's the time. It's when you're bent over on one foot with the saw reaching across the giant sheet of plywood that you make the bad mistake and end up going to the hospital.
So now, just because I'm sure this is already going to happen, I'm going to make a prediction. The comment thread for this podcast is going to be nothing but a litany of gruesome descriptions of injuries garnered in shops.
I hope there's pictures.
No Have pictures. At it, folks. I actually I take pictures of all my injuries.
Of course.
I will give you some. You can put them up on Tested. I've got some really gory pictures of stitches.
There we go. And on that note, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you for supporting us on iTunes.
Yes,
liking,
on iTunes is
reviews, all that stuff. It's fantastic. YouTube, if you like us, post comments. If you want to see more, if you have ideas for shows or questions, you can post ideas for shows in the comments. Send email to podcast@tested.com with your questions. We have a truly ludicrous number of questions right now.
Put questions for Adam.
Questions for Adam in the subject line.
Yes.
We'll see you guys next week.
See you next week.
Bye.